The architecture of revenge. The curious history of spite houses and the people who couldn't let go. Part 1. Imagine being so irritated with your neighbor that you don't write an angry letter. Don't call a lawyer and don't simply glare at them over the fence. Instead, you hire an architect. Months later, a strange, skinny house rises from the ground, carefully positioned to block your neighbor's sunlight, steal their view, or remind them every single day that they should have treated you better. Welcome to the wonderfully peculiar world of spite houses. Every city has houses built for love. Some celebrate success, others shelter growing families or preserve cherished memories. A very small number, however, were built for a far stranger reason: to make somebody else miserable. It may sound like the plot of a comedy movie, but these buildings are real. Scattered across America and around the world, spite houses are monuments to one of humanity's oldest emotions: resentment. They prove that while forgiveness may be good for the soul, revenge sometimes comes with hardwood floors, brick chimneys, and surprisingly high property taxes. Architecture with an attitude. A spite house is a building constructed or substantially modified, not because someone desperately needed another home, but because they desperately wanted someone else to regret crossing them. These odd structures were built to block light, spoil a scenic view, prevent access, or simply announce to the world, "I'm still angry and I have a building permit." Unlike ordinary homes, practicality was often an afterthought. Many are absurdly narrow, awkwardly shaped, or squeezed onto tiny scraps of land that no sensible developer would have considered buildable, yet somehow they worked. Centuries later, tourists travel hundreds of miles just to photograph these architectural temper tantrums. Building a true spite house today, however, would be far more difficult. Modern zoning regulations, setback requirements, planning boards, and building codes leave little room for revenge-driven architecture. Courts are also far less sympathetic to structures built solely to harm a neighbor. In some places, legal traditions such as the old doctrine of ancient lights even recognize a property owner's right to continued daylight. In other words, today's city inspectors are surprisingly effective peacemakers. The skinny house that started a family legend. Perhaps the most famous spite house in America stands in Boston's historic North End. At first glance, it looks like an ordinary wooden home, wedged between two brick buildings. Then you notice something unusual. It is astonishingly thin. Legend tells of two brothers who inherited land from their father. While one brother was away serving in the military, the other built himself a comfortable house, leaving only a narrow strip of land for his absent sibling. When the soldier returned, he was furious. Most people might have argued he built a house instead. The resulting skinny house, barely more than 10 feet wide, blocked his brother's windows, sunlight, and view. Every morning, the larger house awoke to an unforgettable reminder that greed sometimes has very close neighbors. It's difficult to imagine Thanksgiving dinners after that. Historians, however, aren't entirely certain the famous story is true. The house unquestionably exists, but the tale of feuding brothers has become part history and part folklore. Perhaps it really was born from a family quarrel. Or perhaps it was simply a clever solution for an awkward piece of land. Either way, the legend has become almost as famous as the building itself. People seem to enjoy believing that emotions can reshape a skyline. A house built to silence an alley. Not every spite house was aimed at a family member. In Alexandria, Virginia, John Hollinsbury had grown tired of horse-drawn wagons rumbling through a narrow alley beside his home. Add noisy loiterers, curious passers-by, and endless commotion, and his patience finally wore out. His solution? He built a house directly inside the alley. The Hollinsbury Spite House measures only about 7 feet wide and 25 feet deep. It simply sealed the alley shut. Problem solved. Visitors today can still see scratches in the brick walls left by wagon wheels more than a century ago, a reminder that history sometimes leaves marks in unexpected places. Modern traffic engineers might call this an innovative traffic calming measure. His neighbors probably had other names for it. Revenge across the street. Sometimes revenge wasn't narrow. Sometimes it was elegant. Captain Thomas McCobb returned home to Maine in 1806, expecting to inherit the beautiful family mansion. Instead, while he was away at sea, family disputes and legal maneuvering left the house in someone else's hands. McCobb was devastated. Rather than spending years arguing in court, he did something far more dramatic. He built an even grander house directly across from the original. If he couldn't own the family mansion, he would simply build a better one and make sure everyone noticed. Ironically, history had the last laugh. McCobb never married and left no descendants. Eventually, the very relatives whose actions inspired the house inherited it anyway. Revenge, it seems, may produce beautiful architecture, but it rarely produces satisfying endings. The 5-foot grudge. New York City has never lacked colorful real estate stories. One of the strangest belonged to Joseph Richardson. In the 1880s, Richardson owned a ribbon of land only 5 feet wide, but more than 100 feet long. It seemed practically useless. A neighboring developer wanted the property and offered him $1,000. Richardson wanted $5,000. The developer laughed, Richardson remembered. Rather than selling, he hired an architect, who somehow managed to design a 5-foot-wide apartment building, stretching the length of the property. The bizarre structure blocked windows, ruined views, and became famous throughout Manhattan simply as the Spite House. For 14 years, Richardson reportedly lived inside this astonishingly narrow building. Imagine inviting friends over. Nice place. Thanks. I built it out of resentment. The building was eventually demolished in 1915, but its story refuses to disappear. When the government becomes the neighbor, sometimes the target wasn't another homeowner. Sometimes it was City Hall. Dr. John Tyler of Frederick, Maryland, learned that local officials intended to extend a street directly through his property. Rather than accept the decision, he searched the law books and discovered an intriguing loophole. Roads could not be built where construction on a substantial building had already begun. That night, workers started digging. By morning, when road crews arrived, they found a foundation already under construction. The city lost. Tyler won. The road was forced to go somewhere else. And his handsome brick house still stands today. Lawyers might call it knowing your rights. His opponents probably called it something else. The price of spite. One curious thing about spite houses is not that they exist. It is that people were willing to pay for them. These owners invested money, time, skilled labor, and sometimes years of their lives into disputes that might otherwise have faded away. Revenge, it seems, can be astonishingly expensive. Psychologists and economists have long observed a similar pattern. People will occasionally accept personal losses if it means preventing someone else from gaining more. Economists call this spiteful behavior, a tendency demonstrated in the famous ultimatum game, where participants sometimes reject free money simply because an offer feels unfair. Logic says, take the money. Emotion replies, if I can't win fairly, neither will you. A spite house is that impulse poured into brick and timber. Perhaps that is why these stories continue to fascinate us. Most of us would never build an entire house out of resentment, but almost everyone has imagined proving someone wrong. The builders of spite houses simply had enough land, enough determination, and apparently a good architect.
California's long, thin protest. Charles Froling believed he had inherited enough land to build his dream home in Alameda, California. Then the city widened a road and claimed much of his property. To make matters worse, a neighboring landowner refused to sell him the small strip of land he needed to build a normal house. Most people would have accepted defeat. Froling built anyway, using the narrow slice of land that remained. He constructed an extraordinarily slender house, only about 10 feet wide but more than 50 feet long. Carefully positioned beside his neighbor's property, it blocked sunlight. while proving that even the smallest parcel of land could still make a very large statement. More than a century later, visitors still stop to admire one of America's best-known spite houses. One cannot help wondering what the neighbor thought each morning while opening the curtains. Probably something unprintable. Spite travels well. You might think spite houses are an American invention. Not even close. Around the world, wounded pride has inspired some remarkably creative architecture. In Beirut, Lebanon, stands Al-Bassa, appropriately nicknamed the Grudge. At its narrowest point, the apartment building measures only about 2 feet wide. According to local tradition, it was built by one brother, specifically to block another brother's valuable sea view. That may be the narrowest family argument ever constructed in concrete. In Sarajevo, Bosnia, a different story unfolded. When Austro-Hungarian authorities wanted to build a new city hall in the late 19th century, homeowner Ahmed Bendaraya refused to surrender his riverside home. Eventually, officials agreed to dismantle the house and rebuild it, brick by brick, across the river. The relocated home became known as Anat Kuka, literally, the House of Defiance. Today it serves as a popular restaurant, proving that even stubbornness can eventually become a tourist attraction. Even skyscrapers have joined the tradition. One famous story from Buenos Aires tells of the magnificent Kavanaugh building, allegedly constructed to block an aristocratic family's view of their private church. After a broken romance, historians continue to debate how much of the tale is fact, and how much has grown into legend. Yet the story has become inseparable from the building itself. Perhaps that is the curious fate of every spite house. The buildings become history. The arguments become folklore. Today's spite houses. Modern zoning laws have made genuine spite houses exceedingly rare. That doesn't mean spite has disappeared. It has simply become more creative. Instead of constructing entire homes, people sometimes erect towering spite fences, paint their houses in outrageously bright colors after neighborhood disputes, or install oversized lawn ornaments positioned with suspicious precision. The message remains remarkably familiar. You may not like this. Exactly. The architecture has changed. Human nature has not. More than bricks and mortar. Spite houses are unusual, but they are not the only buildings born from powerful emotions. Castles were built from fear, cathedrals from faith, palaces from ambition, memorials from grief. A spite house belongs to a far stranger category. It is architecture built not to inspire a nation, honor a loved one, or protect a city, but simply to irritate one particular person. Perhaps that is why these buildings continue to fascinate us. They reduce enormous human emotions to something wonderfully tangible. Anger becomes a wall, pride becomes a chimney, resentment becomes a front porch. It is almost absurd, and yet, somehow, deeply human. A house is never just a house. Spite houses invite us to laugh, and we should. There is something undeniably funny about spending years, and a small fortune, simply to make someone else's room a little darker. Yet beneath the humor lies a quiet lesson. Resentment is remarkably creative. It persuades intelligent people to invest enormous effort, solving problems that never needed to exist. It convinces us that winning an argument matters more than enjoying life. Sometimes it even inspires monuments to our own unhappiness. And yet there is one final irony. The strange thing about spite houses is that they succeeded. They blocked views. They darkened windows. They frustrated neighbors. For a while. But history remembers almost none of the quarrels that inspired them. The insults faded. The lawsuits gathered dust. The family feuds dissolved into forgotten generations. Only the houses remained. Today, tourists photograph them. Historians debate their legends. Architects admire their ingenuity. The people they were built to offend have long since vanished from memory. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson these curious buildings have to offer. We often imagine our anger will last forever. History quietly disagrees. In the end, brick outlived bitterness. And the houses that were built to preserve resentment became something their builders never intended. Not monuments to revenge, but reminders of how wonderfully, and sometimes hilariously, human we all are.
It's time to study new words in context. On spite. Definition: a feeling of wanting to hurt or upset someone because you are angry with them. Example: he planted the tree out of spite to block his neighbor's view. 2. Irritated. Definition: feeling slightly angry or annoyed because something is bothering you. Example: she became irritated by the loud noise outside. 3. Peculiar. Definition: strange or unusual in a way that makes people notice it. Example: the old house had a very peculiar shape. 4. Practicality. Definition: the quality of being useful and suitable for real life. Example: the design was beautiful, but it lacked practicality. 5. Afterthought. Definition: something that is added, or considered only after everything else has been planned. Example: safety seemed like an afterthought in the building's design. 6. Tantrums. Definition: angry outbursts in which someone loses control of their emotions. Example: the child threw tantrums when he did not get what he wanted. 7. Setback. Definition: a problem or difficulty that slows down your progress. Example: the heavy rain was a setback for the construction project. 8. Wedged. Definition: tightly pushed or stuck between two things. Example: the small house was wedged between two larger buildings. 9. Sibling. Definition: a brother or a sister. Example: she shared the room with her younger sibling. 10. Feuding. Definition: having a long and bitter argument or conflict with someone. Example: the two families had been feuding for many years. 11. Rumbling. Definition: making a deep, continuous, low sound. Example: we heard trucks rumbling down the street. 12. Loiterers. Definition: people who stand or wait in a public place without a clear reason. Example: the shop owner asked the loiterers to leave the entrance. 13. Commotion. Definition: a lot of noisy activity, confusion, or excitement. Example: we heard a commotion coming from the next room. 14. Wore out. Definition: became very tired or lost patience after a long time. Example: the constant noise finally wore him out. 15. Maneuvering. Definition: carefully planning or acting to gain an advantage or reach a goal. Example: through clever maneuvering, she won the business deal. 16. Grudge. Definition: a lasting feeling of anger towards someone because of something they did. Example: he held a grudge against his former friend for many years. 17. Bizarre. Definition: very strange or unusual. Example: the building had a bizarre design that surprised everyone. 18. Throughout. Definition: in every part of a place or during the whole time. Example: the story became famous throughout the country. 19. Intriguing. Definition: very interesting because it makes you want to know more. Example: she told us an intriguing story about the old castle. 20. Loophole. Definition: a small mistake or missing part in a law or rule that lets someone avoid it. Example: the lawyer found a loophole in the law and won the case.
Comprehension questions. 1. What is a spite house? Answer: a spite house is a building that is built mainly to annoy, block, or upset another person, rather than simply to provide a place to live. 2. Why are spite houses unusual? Answer: they are unusual because they were built out of anger or resentment, instead of practical need. 3. According to the legend, why did the Boston skinny house become so famous? Answer: according to the legend, one brother built the narrow house to block his brother's sunlight and view after a family dispute. 4. How did John Hollinsbury solve the problem of the noisy alley beside his house? Answer: he built a very narrow house directly across the alley, blocking wagons and people from using it. 5. Why did Captain Thomas McCobb build a larger house across from his family's mansion? Answer. He built it after losing the family mansion in a dispute. He wanted to build an even grander home where everyone could see it. 6. Why did Joseph Richardson refuse to sell his narrow piece of land? Answer. He believed the developer's offer was unfair. So he built a very narrow apartment building instead. 7. How did Dr. John Tyler stop the city from building a road through his property? Answer. He quickly began building a house. After discovering a legal loophole that prevented the city from using the land. 8. Why are true spite houses difficult to build today? Answer. Modern zoning laws, building codes, and planning regulations make it much harder to build a house simply to annoy a neighbor. 9. What does the article mean by the price of spite? Answer. It means that revenge often costs people a great deal of money, time, effort, and emotional energy. 10. What does the ultimatum game teach us about human behavior? Answer. It shows that people sometimes choose fairness or revenge over personal gain, even if it means losing something themselves. 11. Which international spite house became a restaurant? Answer. Anak Kuka in Sarajevo, Bosnia, later became a popular restaurant. 12. According to the article, what are some modern versions of spite houses? Answer. Modern examples include spite fences, brightly painted houses, and large lawn decorations used to annoy neighbors. 13. Why does the author compare castles, cathedrals, palaces, and spite houses? Answer. To show that buildings often reflect human emotions, such as fear, faith, ambition, grief, or resentment. 14. What is the greatest irony about spite houses? Answer. The people they were built to annoy have been forgotten, but the houses themselves are still remembered and admired. 15. What is the main lesson of the article? Answer. Anger and revenge may last for a while, but they do not last forever. In the end, people forget the quarrels, while the buildings remain as reminders of human nature. 16. If you had been one of the people in these stories, would you have built a spite house? Why or why not? Answer. I would not have built a spite house, because it would have cost too much money and time. I think it is better to solve problems peacefully than to spend years trying to get revenge.